pressure-wise, that was some rough times. And I remember just thinking, this is never going to end. God, why do you have us here? And he wouldn't move us and things wouldn't happen. And it was a rough time for us to kind of go through all that. But I look back on that and I learned so much about people and God and all kinds of stuff in that. So be encouraged. Peter says tough times are coming, but they only last for a little while. They're going to come into our life and they're going to come in and out. And we'll talk about kind of how they do that in a minute. And then he goes on to say that tough times are a necessary part of our life. Now, I don't think about tough times being necessary. He says it in the passage we read tonight, or the translation we read tonight. He says, you may have to suffer trials of different kinds. And the phrase he uses there is a word that literally means it is necessary at times you suffer trials. In other words, God's got it planned for our lives. We don't know what's coming tomorrow, but God does. I don't know what's coming next year, but you know something you can bank on, some of those promises of God. God makes us a promise in the Bible. He's got some trials out in front of you that you're going through. Isn't that an encouraging promise? He's got some traps set for you. No, I'm joking. He doesn't have that, but he's got some tough times for all of us in front of us, things he's going to take us through. And when we begin to get prepared that they're coming and they don't last that long, we start to see that it's necessary we go through them, because it's in those trials that God starts to shape us and do some things in our life that can't happen any other way than to go through the difficulty. We've talked about on Tuesday nights before, y'all, how really it's in difficulty in your life, it's in the tough times that you lean on God the most, that you trust Him the most. Sunday we're going to talk in depth a little bit about this, how going through adversity makes you depend on something outside yourself. When everything's going good, life is usually pretty easy to live. But when everything's not going good, you have to start looking for answers other places. And that's kind of God's invitation to look at Him. And sometimes it's necessary for God to start shaping us into the people He wants us to be, and the people that will be better people, better cross followers, better humans. He has to take us through that. It's necessary because it's kind of the only way we really get the stuff God's wanting us to get. I was thinking the other day about any kind of project worth doing, anything you do in your house. If you're building woodworking stuff, if you're doing like Danelle and I did, you're putting in a flower bed, if you're redoing stuff inside the house, if you're restoring a car, there is a phase in doing those kind of things that you got to do stuff that's no fun, isn't it? I mean, there's a phase where you're doing stuff like just sanding over and over and over and over. You're not seeing any beauty, you're not seeing any stuff. There was a phase in our flower beds where we were just digging and digging and digging and digging, and it was just no fun. You know, it's groundwork stuff, but it had to be done to get it where it was going to be. And that's kind of the way our lives are. We go through these times that are tough, that are difficulties, but God says they're necessary. They're a part of Him growing us up. And then He says something interesting. He says, you may have to suffer grief, is the word He uses there. And the word means to be made sorrowful, I can't talk tonight, sorrowful, to be sad, or to grieve. In other words, when you go through these times, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be like a sad time.
Sorry, I never had my phone on.
Oh, that's all right.
Carol's coming.
Just phone him out. We got other people coming there. We have to buzz everybody in here because the bank, for some reason, don't want you to leave the doors open. Can you imagine? But when you go through these times, God said we need to be prepared when we go through them, because they're going to be difficult. There's going to be sorrow. There's going to be sadness. And I don't know about y'all, but I don't like to be sad. I hate sadness. I'm usually more of a happy-go-lucky person. And lately, the pressure's kind of been on, and I've been sadder. And I don't like being sad. I don't like being depressed. I don't like being down. I hate living like that. But God said there are times in our life that it's just going to be sad. It's going to be depressing. It's going to be bleak. There's going to be times where we struggle, and it's in those times that God starts to get our attention, and He starts doing some of that shaping and some of that working in our life that only He can do. It's how we grow. It's a big part of God growing us into the people He wants us to be. I remember when I was a teenager, we didn't know what was wrong with me till we got through this later and realized it was kind of growing pains. But I used to get these terrible cramps in the back of my legs, like in your, what do you call it, your knee pit. I'm not sure what it is, but whatever you call the back of your knees. And they would just hurt me so bad at night, like early teens, all the way up to 16 or so. And I remember all we could do to help them is my mom would heat towels up in the microwave, and I would lay on these towels and put them hot around my legs, and it would kind of help with the pain. But we found out later that what it was, the doctor says, just growing pains. As your body's kind of growing so fast, and you can tell I grew into this super tall guy. I don't know how a guy my height gets growing pains. I think I was done growing in about 8th grade. But just went through these times where it's stretching your body and it's changing so fast, your body has a hard time keeping up with it, and it hurts. And that is the way growth is sometimes with God. Sometimes it's joyous and it's exciting and it's wonderful, and we have vision and purpose and all these great things. I was talking to these guys that are going to Papua New Guinea before. I said, how are you guys doing? And they said, we're in the exciting times right now. It's good. We're getting ready to raise funds and go do it. I said, give it about 3 years in. And I'm joking there. But we know that the truth is, these guys know they're prepared, but there's difficulty in going in God's direction. I used to have this t-shirt when I was like a high school student. I got right with God when I was like 16, and God started doing all this stuff in my life. So I was buying all these Christian t-shirts because I thought that was going to help me be spiritual at the time. And I had this one that had all these fish on it, and they're all swimming in one direction. And then it had that ichthus fish, like the Jesus symbol, and he's swimming in this direction. And on the top of the shirt it said, "Go against the flow." And I thought, man, this shirt is awesome. But that shirt was saying exactly what Peter's saying here. When we go against the flow of life, when we say, I'm going to go kind of in God's direction rather than what I want to do or what I want to think, there's going to be some growth involved in that, and it's going to bring times that it's going to be hard. It won't be easy. There'll be some sorrow, there'll be some grief, there'll be some pain involved. How many of y'all right now, if we looked on the dashboard of your life, and we've talked about gauges in here before, where are your spiritual, emotional gauges running? We'll just kind of do 3 phases on the gauge of emotion tonight. If 0, if you're right here is, let me do it y'all's way so you can see. If 0 is right here, and this is like, you're bummed out, completely sad. If straight up and down is like, I'm about halfway. I'm not sad, but I'm not down. Or if you're just pumped crazy up, happy tonight, and things are going wonderful for you, because we're all in kind of different phases. How many of y'all would say, we'll do it about 6 ways. How many of y'all would say, I'm all the way over here, I'm at the bottom? Raise your hand. Anybody bottomed out? I'm pretty close to the bottom right now all my whole life. We're very straight in this church, so we talk about, this has been some stressful times, job changes and all that. I'm not bottomed out, but I'm a little off of E and the light is on. So you go through those times. How many of y'all would say, I'm halfway between very sad and okay? Anybody there in that place tonight? Several of y'all kind of in that place tonight. Those are difficult times. How many of y'all would say, I'm right there on the not sad, not happy, I'm just okay, Anybody
that's
there?
where I am.
Several of y'all somewhere in that area. Anybody kind of between okay and happy? Like, oh, good, great. Some of y'all
I'm
are
happy.
right there on that place. Good, great. That's good to see. I have a lot of those times in my life, and I love those times. I celebrate them. Anybody maxed out tonight? You're just like turning backflips for Jesus. That's awesome, Clay. That's great. You got a couple of maxed out ones. And I love it when people are there in their life, because sometimes if you're bummed out, I'm not the kind of person that if I'm bummed out and somebody's happy around me, I'm like, oh, why are you so happy? I want people like Clay around me, because it motivates me, encourages me. It's like, yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to get out of jail soon and things are going to be fine. And I see that. So anyway, I asked y'all that tonight to take a good look at kind of where you're at on that emotional, spiritual gauge in your life, because those things are kind of linked. And to know if you're maxed out, happy, and doing great, be aware that these things come sometimes, and don't let them take you when they do and knock you off track with God, because He's doing something. If you're over here more where I've been a little lately, or somewhere in between that on the kind of negative side of the gauge, know that God's working in that. And that's the thing God keeps hitting me with in the times of difficulty in my own life. It's like, you're working, God. You haven't given up. This hasn't taken you by surprise. You got plans. You're doing your thing. God says He knows the plans He has for us. They're plans to give us a hope and a future. He's got big plans for us, even when things are going bad. So it's going to be kind of sad. Is this feeling a little negative to y'all tonight? Is it like, you're bumming us out, Jim? It's not because I'm sad. It's because I'm going somewhere.
I just want to say, we lost a son. He was 25. It was one of Dick's older boys. And as sad as that was, it doesn't last. I mean,
Right.
we're never gonna forget them or get over it 100%, but even that grief and sorrow is just for a season.
Right.
We're able to function. We almost lost Tom a couple years ago. That was
Right.
hard to go through, his accident, but it doesn't last.
Right.
You end up being able to function again in life. I mean, most people do. I mean, I know some people struggle
Right.
with grief and never get beyond it, but for us, he didn't keep us down on that end of the gauge.
Patty, that is such a great thing to say it like that. He didn't keep us down on
Yeah.
that end of the gauge.
Yeah.
If you will let God, He will pull you up out of your misery. He'll pull you up out of anything. I mean, I'm talking about stupid little stuff in my life that gets me sad, pressure of job and work and stuff like that. Big things that some of you guys have gone through, loss of a child, loss of a spouse, health issues that aren't going away. And that kind of stuff can be heavy, heavy stuff. But even inside of that, God's always pulling us up, encouraging us, and reminding us, hey, I'm here, even in the darkest of times. And it gets better. That's awesome. So awesome you shared that. Here's another cool thing about this, y'all. Is what I was telling you, if it sounds a little negative, I'm not just bummed out and throwing it on y'all tonight. We're going somewhere with this. It's getting there. God's got some good stuff to say near the end of this passage. He says that we suffer grief, and he says it's in all kinds of trials. And that word is interesting in the original language because it literally means various colors or various sorts. There's various shades of trials we go through in our life. I know when I'm working like on Photoshop stuff for Sundays to put like stuff up on the screen, some things, the lettering and all, and certain fonts and all, shows up pretty clear, but if you put a little bit of a shadow behind it, it shows up better. And I'll put just like a little bit of shadow on something. Dick knows all this is sign painting stuff. And I'll put just a little hazy, kind of transparent shadow, just enough to where you don't really notice it, but there's something about it that makes the font stand out a little better. And then sometimes letters will just be washed out and the shadow won't help it. And I have to put a dark, heavy, bold shadow on it to get that font to stand out so you'll see it on the screen. And I make that shadow as hard-edged and as dark as I can make it so it'll really be bold and it'll make those letters stand out. And God said that is the way He runs trials through our lives. There's sometimes that God just needs to bump us a little bit and get us on track. Or maybe we're on track and we're doing everything where we're trying to walk in His direction, but He needs to teach us one little thing, and He'll give us just a little bit of shading on the side of our life and say, I'm going to take you through a little difficulty because I want to draw you closer to me in this, Jim. And He'll do that. And then there's other times that He'll just come down and bring the hammer down, full print, Jim. It's time to get it, and He'll drop the hammer on us, and it'll help us to just kind of get up from under that and say, oh God, I need you. And it kind of turns us in His direction to depend on Him. And Peter says we go through these various shades of trials, various kinds, and they come in all sorts of stuff. They can come in something as minor as you have a bad day. Somebody flips you the bird in traffic and it makes you mad, or somebody says something mean to you and you get discouraged by it, or it can go all the way up to you lose a son or a daughter or something tragic in your life happens. But inside all those shades of trials, God is right there in the back of Photoshop running all of it in our lives. And I'm not saying He's doing tragic bad stuff to you. I'm saying He's in control and He's not allowing anything to happen to you that's not in the plan, that's not in the purpose that He has for our lives. God's in control, and I don't know about you, but I forget that when the trials are going on. I sit on the bed and cry to Danelle and say, God's forgotten us. Get mad, and He hasn't, y'all. God does not forget us. He's always at the controls. He's always at the helm. He's always working. And this is probably my favorite word in this whole passage. It's when Peter gets down to it and he says all this stuff. These are a little while, and you've had to suffer them, and they bring sorrow and grief, and they're different shades. But he says what we are going through on this planet while we live here is the word trials. And the word trials in the Bible, there's several different words for it, but this one means an experiment or a trial or a proving. And when you think about that, when you go through tough times, God said they're kind of like an experiment. They're kind of like a proving to see where you're at with God and see where you're at and trust in Him and see where you're at in life. Now, I was thinking about this the other day, and y'all, it's not a trial for God by God. It's a trial for us